It's Electric Drives. Your electric vehicle future starts right now. Welcome to the show. I'm Anthony Algmin, and I'm joined by my co-host, Bob Reese. We created the show to make it easier for others looking to move to electric vehicles, and that's more and more people every day. We're out there using EVs in normal commutes and road trips, and we'll share the wisdom we've gained from living our lives with electric vehicles. You can join in the conversation by sending your questions and topic ideas to questions@electricdrives.us, by joining our Facebook group, or by becoming a patron at patreon.com/electric drives to get exclusive content and help support the show. Bob, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing really well. Really well.
Awesome. So today we have a question from Jeff. I'm just going to read you the whole email because it provides a lot of context, and we'll have a conversation about that. So Jeff says, "Hi, I've just started listening to your podcasts, including some old ones, and have a question I haven't found a consistent answer to. I'm an electrical engineer, retired, and realize in the case of plug-in hybrids, my answer may vary by manufacturer, but for full EVs, there must be a consistent answer." Goes on to say, "My wife passed a little over a year ago, and my dog and I usually go for fast food restaurant drive-thrus. Then we sit in the parking lot eating while listening to podcasts on CarPlay. The issue is I live in Memphis, and the climate usually requires me to leave the car in idle, so either the heat or AC can run for the 15 or 20 minutes that I eat. It's really no different than had I been stuck in rush hour traffic and brought to a dead stop due to traffic jams. I would think it's better for the health of the vehicle to idle in an EV versus gas. Would we agree?" That's question number one. We'll come back to that in a second. But my bigger question is that with a plug-in hybrid, are there models that will remain on electric during extended idle time versus switching to gas, which would defeat his purpose? If yes, is there some approximation of the miles lost due to each minute of idle time, presumably by equating kilowatt hours? I know that Tesla uses a heat pump, but I think that's an exception. Anyway, thanks for your time in the podcast, Jeff. Okay, so first off, first, Jeff, we're sorry for your loss of your wife, and certainly appreciate your situation of not wanting to sit in an idling car every day, for 15 or 20 minutes. And you're not the only one who has that usage pattern. There's a lot of folks, I see it in the pickup line for the kids. There's a lot of people that'll just sit in an idling car and they may not be thinking at all about what they're doing for the environment. But on the plus side, at least you're in Memphis, where the food is some of the best I've ever had. I spent a few months doing consulting work in Memphis, and I miss it dearly. I'm going to try to get back there at least for a day in November if things go well, and I cannot wait to have a meal there again. But so you couldn't pick a better spot to have some fast food. So I'll address the first one. Is it better for the health of the vehicle to idle in an EV versus gas? Yes, absolutely. An electric vehicle is perfect for being able to run the air conditioner or heat without having to run the engine, because it's much more efficient in doing that, because you don't have simply a reliance on the big motor running just to create your HVAC system. And granted, when you're in the heat mode, the gasoline engine naturally throws off a lot of heat, so it just kind of sucks it into the vehicle. But think about how inefficient that is. You're running an entire engine just to be able to create heat. That's not an efficient situation. And then on the air conditioner side, you're running the engine, which creates a ton of heat, and then you're running the belts to then power the compressor, which then puts the air conditioner into your car. Super inefficient versus just running it off a battery, because these electrical systems for HVAC are far less demanding on the battery or on the electrical usage than moving the vehicle. Moving a 2-ton car is going to be a lot more strain on that battery. So you can sit there, whether you're at a restaurant or you're in the pickup line or you're in a traffic jam, you can do that for hours. Bob, did I cover that right? Would you agree with what I said there?
I would agree with it, because generally, and after you overcome the initial humidity or temperature and get the car buffered, I know my car and most other cars have a recirc mode, where it just recircs and just brings in a little fresh air. So the energy consumption after that point is minimal. While with a gasoline engine, it's sitting there idling at 900 RPM. It could go 24/7 on that. So it definitely uses a lot more energy, because it's trying to think, okay, we're getting ready to move the car. I forgot whether this one also had the mention of a plug-in hybrid, or was that?
The first question did not, but this is where the question really gets interesting, and that's why I took the first question, because like I knew the answer to that was yes, electric vehicle for sure is going to be a more efficient situation for
Oh
running
yeah,
HVAC alone. The plug-in hybrid, though, I'm like, I've never owned a plug-in hybrid, and I would imagine that it will be the same thing. But Bob, you're the expert on this. What are your thoughts in terms of a plug-in hybrid and that situation?
yeah. The plug-in hybrid will use the battery, the 12-volt battery, but it'll draw from whatever bigger battery you have. If it's a plug-in, maybe you have a 15 kilowatt battery or whatever. So it may cycle that on occasionally to charge the to charge the 12-volt battery. So the 12-volt battery that can then supply the air conditioning and the heat.
Mm-hmm.
But it sort of depends on the size of the bigger battery and what the charge is when you come to the restaurant. Have you depleted most of the battery to get to the restaurant, or the drive-through, and then that means you don't have much battery left, and then it is going to probably turn on the engine in addition to get the battery up to a certain charge. Because I know on the Volt, it might have a 10% window as far as if you set it for 50%, it may go down to 40 and then up to 60. So it may kick on the engine for a period of time to get it up to that 60% and then cuts off, and it depletes as you're warming up the cabin or whatever else is going on.
So I imagine, though, I mean, in reality, it may even be possible for 15 or 20 minutes to simply run in an accessory mode, even in a gas powered car, because the 12-volt battery, I mean, you're not moving the car with this. Like, and I would imagine
Right.
like a plug-in hybrid has way more energy in that battery than you would ever use in a half an hour, even of just sitting there running at a reasonable temperature, the HVAC system. But I mean, you can run even in a gasoline powered car in accessory mode without the engine running for a period of time. I think you would be fine for 10 or 15 minutes under most circumstances. I don't think that you're going to kill a decently running 12-volt battery in a regular car just by doing that. I don't know, I haven't tried it, I haven't looked at the math behind it, but I kind of think that maybe that's an option as well, is kill the engine, run your HVAC off of accessory mode for a while, and you may save some gas, you may save the environment a little bit, and it might be better on your car in the end. Although that and Jeff mentioned too, he doesn't drive a ton anyway, and so it actually may be more harmful to the engine to be killing the engine when you're stopping for food and then starting it back up again. It might be better for the engine to just let it run, get up to temperature, put some some rotations on that engine, because you may not be driving it otherwise very much. And so letting it run for 20 minutes might be a healthier thing for that engine. So there's a lot of factors to consider, I guess, when you think about that. And perhaps, I mean, I wouldn't want to necessarily take a big chance of running it for 15 or 20 minutes on accessory mode when, maybe the battery doesn't have that much juice, and then I would get stranded or need to get a jump to be able to get going again.
Well, accessory mode only would use the fan. It would not activate the compressor.
Oh, it doesn't? I didn't know that.
No. So if you have a plug-in hybrid, it will activate the compressor to dehumidify, maintain cool temperature, or with the Tesla, hot temperatures. So that would be an entirely different animal.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I didn't really think about, because the compressor is actually
Part of
belt
the
driven.
engine.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's belt driven, so it really wouldn't be able to do that. So ignore everything I was talking about, because it doesn't really apply. Although I guess on something, some days you wouldn't need the compressor, but regardless, you're probably with a plug-in hybrid, you're probably in a better situation anyway, because then it'll kick on the engine as needed. But it may also mean, so that's a good question. In a plug-in hybrid, if the engine is driving a kind of fancy alternator just to charge the battery, and all the accessories are running off the battery, does a plug-in hybrid still have a compressor tied to the belt system? It doesn't. It can't, because it's still, you're going to be able to run an HVAC system even when you're not in gasoline power mode, right?
Correct, correct. Yeah,
Yeah.
so you'd be able to run the air conditioner just off the battery, basically. So it just, in the case of the Volt, VOLT, it's
Mhm.
a motor generator.
Yeah.
So the motor just charges the battery.
Mhm.
So all the time you're using the battery.
You're always using the battery. Yeah. And this is, so for me personally, this is why I've never been keen on plug-in hybrids to purchase for myself, is that I think they're so freaking complicated. It's like, let's take all of the complexities of a gasoline car and all the complexities of an electric vehicle, like a battery electric vehicle, and combine them all together. That just seems like there's way more things that can go wrong with a plug-in hybrid. Now, I don't think that in reality they're any less reliable, but it just feels complex to me. But I think that it's a good, especially as a transition type of vehicle, until there's more ready charging everywhere, and it's a safer play, a little bit more conservative play for somebody who is interested in doing a battery electric but isn't quite ready for all of the perceived hassles anyway of owning a battery electric, where you really don't have the option of running a motor to be able to or running an engine to be able to charge the battery when you're in a bind. So I think for a lot of people out there, the plug-in hybrids will continue to be a viable option for some time to come. I think that's a great transition. It's amazing too, like how that really helps solve this transition time where there's just not enough public charging options, when there's not enough places to get help when an electric, the rare times an electric vehicle runs out of charge. So I feel like that it's really a good thing, because you can then still use the battery mode most of the time. I know, like, your daughter uses battery mode almost exclusively in that Volt. um
Right, right.
and then when that happens, you're pretty much just rolling an electric vehicle like anybody else. So
Right, right. And she'll typically, like, she ran out of juice on the way home today. So then the motor generator kicks on and gets the battery up, charged up to a certain point, and then it acts like a battery electric car after that point.
mhm, mhm. So the letter from Jeff, and hopefully we did a fair job. Is there anything else in terms of Jeff's letter that you want to address before we move into a couple other topics for this episode?
I've forgotten exactly what he said, but I think we've addressed quite a bit of it.
Yeah, and what we don't have is um the amount of miles lost to each minute of idle time. I
Oh,
would
that
imagine.
can vary so much depending upon temperature, humidity. Um, if you're using a plug-in, did you precondition it before you left home so the battery and the cabin are all up to temperature? So there's so many variables. I think we had referenced a couple shows ago about whether a car would be okay in a snowstorm.
Mhm, mhm.
And we were able to show that because of the fact that you're really not doing much with the engine's not having to use excess heat to warm the cabin, you're basically recycling the heat
Mhm.
quite a bit, and you're not having the same load that you do with the gasoline cars, so
Oh.
they can go a lot longer.
Yeah, and that's really, I mean, the key point here is that you're probably, like, on a minute by minute basis, you're probably losing way less than a mile a minute. Like, you're not, you're just, I just can't imagine you're burning through the kilowatt hours that quickly just by running some HVAC stuff sitting in the same place. Like, I think you could do that for many hours before it really became a material difference in your range. Like, I feel like that's it's so minor. I even just think, like, the when it comes to charging your car at your home, I've got a 48 amp charging on a 60 amp circuit in a house that has a 100 amp service. So the charging of my electric car is so much more than the rest of my house combined in terms of energy flow and energy usage, because nothing in my home, everything in my home put together really doesn't add up to 48 amps the way my car will when it's recharging overnight. And that's the amount of energy it takes to be able to power a car going, 60, or in my case 75, 80 miles an hour, for a couple hours a day. It just takes a lot of energy. And by comparison, running an air conditioner and a window unit or something like that, or your air conditioner in a car, it's really just not comparable to how much energy it takes to move a 2-ton vehicle at speed. I mean, it's just, way different in terms of energy consumption.
Mm-hmm. I've been plugged into a charge point charger, and I'll be eating my lunch there and watch. It's a 7 kilowatt charger, and I'll notice that even though it's 7 kilowatts coming into the car, as soon as I turn on the car, the air conditioner kicks in, and then it's running at maybe 3 or 4 kilowatts until it's got the cabin up to the temperature, and then after that point, you're only running at 1 kilowatt. So there's very little drain on the system.
Yeah, 1 kilowatt is a very small amount of drain. I mean, like that is not a lot of drain. So anyway, so hopefully this helps answer the question. It's definitely better for an electric vehicle in that kind of use case than a gas powered car. Is it worth buying an electric vehicle for that? That's probably a stretch. But certainly in your next car, a plug-in hybrid may very well suit the bill nicely, and certainly something to consider. But hopefully that is useful information. In the few minutes that we have left, one thing that we did want to talk about too are just other non-propulsion sources of energy draw, and some fears that we've heard at various times, like, if I park my car at an airport parking lot for a week, will it be dead when I come back? And that, I get why that's a fear, because I'll tell you, the Tesla is the third, and granted in a very short period of time, the third electric vehicle that I've owned. And I will say, like, when not plugged into a charger, it goes through battery very quickly by comparison, because of mostly Sentry Mode. So Sentry Mode is that mode in a Tesla where it uses the multiple cameras, which kick on and record any activity around the vehicle whenever somebody gets too close or parks a car nearby or walks by or something like that, and it just records that clip. And just retains it in case somebody does anything or bumps into your car or whatever. You have a video record of it. So it's kind of, I mean, it's super cool feature that they have that alongside the dash cam functionality for when you're actually driving it. But what I've noticed is the Sentry Mode, which I turn off at home because it's sitting in a garage, but at work I leave it on. And so if I'm at work for say 8-9 hours, I can lose 7% of my battery in an 8-hour, 9-hour day.
Wow.
And it's really troubling me, because what we were just talking about, it's like you use so little energy under most circumstances. I'm like, what in the heck is making Sentry Mode use so much energy? The one thing I do know is that it won't let you turn on Sentry Mode if your battery level is too low. Like if it's under 20%, it won't even let you turn it on. So it goes like, the lower the battery amount that you have, the more cautious it is about losing battery charge. But it just knows, like, it's like, hey, you're in your office parking lot, there's some stuff happening around. Like I may have 7 Sentry Mode events while I'm at work that day, just from people coming in and out of their cars or whatever. And it just strikes me like, why is it using so much electricity to do Sentry Mode? But I'm sure that at some point they're going to do some sort of magic software update, and then it'll go way down in terms of the energy usage. But for now, that's noticeable. But so I wouldn't worry too much about leaving the car at an airport, just because I know it's going to manage that and limit it, especially if I were to turn off Sentry Mode just proactively, which is probably not what they want you to do. But like, I may do that if I were going to leave it for an extended period of time. But the Tesla was just so much worse than other cars in terms of the non-usage battery drain. I really didn't notice anything when I was leaving the car for several nights at other places. So Bob, what's your experience been? Are there any other things that you can think of that draw noticeable amounts of charge over a period of time?
Well, I think with Tesla, they also have it ready to receive updates. And as such, it's sort of like in a a mode where it's looking to see if there's any updates are there and can it download the updates and those types of things. I don't know if those turn on and off. I know
Well, it for the
with my
updates,
car, it doesn't do updates.
yeah.
So I can, both of my vehicles, I can have it fully charged at night. And when I come in the morning, it says fully charged.
Hmm.
So it's not using anything because unless I go in and check it every once in a while to see, I want to check the tires or I want to check what the battery charge is to make sure I've got enough for the next day type of thing.
Yeah, I will say for the software updates in a Tesla, it only does those if you're connected to Wi-Fi. So it won't do the download
Oh,
over the air on the modem. They really want you to have a Wi-Fi connection to make that happen. But it also does what it does have is like cabin overheat protection. So it's constantly thinking about what the temperature is on the inside of the car, and it'll run the air conditioner to cool down the cabin if the cabin gets to like 105 degrees or 100 degrees or whatever it is, just to keep the cabin at a reasonable temperature so things don't melt or otherwise become too uncomfortable inside the car, which, I think that's it's a nice feature, but again, it takes energy just to be monitoring all of that and maintaining that. So that's that, and two, like with the connections to the car, what it does have is like I can unlock the doors to my car wherever I am. I don't have to be Bluetooth connected to it. So somehow you're right, it's keeping some sort of heartbeat connection alive so that I can connect to it to my phone via, I mean, it's got to be coming over the cell signal. So it's yeah, it's interesting that that's the case, and I'm glad that your cars, you don't see that in your cars. I guess Teslas
no,
are just busier. They're just doing a lot of stuff. It's just their
correct. Yeah.
standby mode is got more going on, I guess, and maybe that's the consequence of having a car that is my iPad on a skateboard,
Yep.
type of thing. But it's it I haven't seen it become a problem, but I certainly could see that being the case if you parked it with 50% charge, thinking that you're going to have 50% charge in the morning, especially if you left Sentry Mode on or some of these other things. I also think, too, it will do battery conditioning at any time it wants to, like just to make sure that it's in, the best, state. I'm sure it's doing that kind of thing. So,
Hmm.
who knows? I don't know what it's doing, but it's it does what it does, so I just let it do it. And I guess though that the one thing that a lot of folks do say that I tend to agree with is, even though I will always pretty much have my charge limit set to 80%, I usually don't go over that because I don't need to go over that for most times unless I'm about to go on a trip. I leave the car I leave it plugged into my charge point charger at home all the time. And so when the
Right.
car wants to get electricity, it can, and I'll notice every now and then it'll have a little blip of like, oh, it was doing something, it took a little bit of charge here or there to make sure it stayed at the 80%. And I don't think too much of it, especially because on the home electricity, it's a pretty negligible amount that it's going to be pulling just to maintain. I mean, it could be a few cents here and there. It's really not something that would move the needle for most people. So
Right, right. Most cars are set up. A lot of the GM products, they say ABC, always be charging.
yeah,
So you always keep it plugged in because it does get, if it's always plugged in, it's going to maintain the battery temperature, which is
yeah,
helps out on the health of the battery. So if you do take a long trip, the battery's already up to the proper temperature.
yeah, yeah, and I'm sure that's a bigger deal in the wintertime,
Oh
whereas if the
yeah.
battery, if the battery's getting down to 10 degrees, 20 degrees, it's certainly going to have trouble holding the charge as well. And we know that that's certainly the case. And as the weather turns, I noticed some trees outside of work were turning yellow today. I'm like, stop that I'm not ready for you to be getting into fall just yet. But I think the remainder of the week in Chicago is going to be very cool, so we're gonna get used to this before we know it. Bob, anything else for our show today, or we ready to call it a show?
I think we've addressed most of the questions.
All right. So that wraps up our show for today. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that YouTube bell icon. Please send your questions and topic suggestions to us at questions@electricdrives.us. And we'd love for you to join us on Facebook and Patreon. All the links are, of course, in the show notes. Thank you for spending some time with us, and we wish you a smooth road ahead on your own electric drives. Thanks, everybody.